Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News, South Florida Conservative News Center. It is Thursday, June 18th, 9:15 a.m. in sunny Florida. It's going to be 1,000 degrees today, so dress appropriately. And those of us who can hear without hearing are hearing the cry of the many, many people across the United States who have decided that President Trump has surrendered to the Iranians and that all things good and evil have changed poles. That's not actually true. And a lot of it goes down to the basic neglect of America's educational system for social studies, first and foremost, and secondly, for business related terms once you get into high school. The first part is due to everything that you've seen about Congress and everything else in the last 2 years, and again during Trump's first administration. And now we are falling apart as a country, especially those bandwagon Republicans, those Knicks fans that are just Knicks fans for the first time in their lives because they want to be buy a hat for the winning team. You know those people. I personally could give a shit less, but you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to talk about the importance and absolutely no impact that the U.S. Iranian Memorandum of Understanding has upon the peace process. Okay. So let's say that we are going to go from here on out and just try to get some terms and then work from there. Okay. The first thing that you have to know is that President Trump has achieved a major peace breakthrough. The second is that the United States has surrendered its leverage and handed Iran a diplomatic victory. No, those aren't true. The truth is much more complicated because we can evaluate the document as can anybody else. You don't need the NSA to do this. We first, because that's not their job anyway, but we first need to understand what a memorandum of understanding actually is. An MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, is not a treaty. It is not necessarily legally binding. The problem that people have had in the Trump administration is Donald Trump uses a lot of business terms. He does not use a lot of bullshit government terms. Therefore, if you didn't know the government terms, you probably also don't know what the business terms are. And that's where Memorandum of Understanding comes in. It is not a treaty. It is not necessarily legally binding unless it says that this section is legally binding, which the document that I have seen does not say anywhere. It does not automatically mean that the underlying disputes have been resolved. And it also, just because you probably wonder, doesn't mean that the United States wrote the entirety of the document or any of it in some places. So think of it as a framework for negotiations. It identifies issues that both parties are willing to discuss. That's it. It identifies issues that both parties are willing to discuss. So when you go through those outrage ones, that's things that both parties are willing to discuss and establishes a process for attempting to reach a final agreement. Now, that distinction is important because much of the public discussion treats this document as if it were the final settlement, which it is not. In fact, the most important disputes between Washington and Tehran are unresolved at this point and are unresolved in that document. When you examine the 14 points, one thing immediately stands out. Much of the document focuses on sanctions relief, oil exports, shipping access, release of frozen assets, and economic normalization. By contrast, the issues most Americans associate with the Iranian problem, which is nuclear weapons, nuclear weapons, nuclear weapons, and how do we keep them from having them, is largely deferred to future negotiations. Now, that doesn't automatically make the agreement good or bad. It does make it unusual. Historically, American negotiators with Iran have generally followed a simple sequence. It's compliance, verification, then relief. In other words, demonstrate compliance first and receive economic benefits afterwards. This memorandum appears to reverse that sequence. Economic relief comes first. The difficult nuclear questions come later. Now, whether that represents an insanely clever diplomatic strategy or a dangerous gamble remains to be seen. This is one of the ones that I think that the Iranians probably wrote. The next one that receives a surprisingly little attention and should be, because we've been talking about it here. I think one or two other Arab, not so much the real Al Arabias, but a few Arab people that have their own sites, is who is actually negotiating for Iran. American officials have stated they are speaking with multiple elements of the Iranian government. And in fact, if you need a reference, Vice President J.D. Vance, in a recent interview, you can look him up because it's probably on 15 different channels, says that he's talking to all kinds of different people, IRGC, some other crazy people, regular bureaucrats, across the board consensus building as to a peace process. All right. But Iran is not a political system of that nature. Historically, the ultimate authority on matters of war and peace is rests with the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, who is the son of the last Ayatollah. And that raises an important question, as in the Where's Waldo story, who possesses the authority to make commitments on behalf of the Iranian state? The real issue isn't who signed the document. The real issue is who can enforce it. Can the people sitting across the negotiating table actually deliver compliance? So until that question is answered, assumptions about Iran's commitment to a lasting settlement remain speculative at best. The next issue is the 60-day timeline. And I think many observers are asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, does Iran think the U.S. wants a deal? And the more important question is, does the United States believe that Iran wants a deal? Okay. Viewed through that lens, a memorandum may be less a peace agreement than a 60-day test, a test that is designed to determine whether Tehran wants long-term normalization or merely short-term relief. And there are significant incentives involved. The agreement opens the door to renewed shipping activity, increased oil exports, access to financial channels, and potentially substantial economic benefits. The exact numbers remain uncertain, but even a short period of restored economic activity can strengthen Iran's position. And that leads to the central concern expressed by the critics. What happens on day 61? The oil's flowing, shipping's resumed, financial restrictions have eased. Suppose Iran's economic position is improved, which it will to some extent. If you want real numbers, go to www.southfloridaconservative.com. We have a thing there that explains how much money they can bring back in and what it would really do to their coffers and their ability to, unfortunately, fight on as a war. And what happens if the nuclear questions remain unresolved? Do the negotiations get extended? Does the process simply begin again? Does Trump light them up like a Christmas tree? Those questions are not unreasonable because the most difficult issues have been postponed rather than settled. And by adding the dynamics of Lebanon and the Israeli removal from there themselves, there's an additional spoiler. If you looked at these 14 points, and we'll go into it more later, you will see that since, like, if you don't believe me, do a very simple issue. Take them, put them into an AI system and say, does this appear to be written by the Trump administration based on Trump's objectives in the Iran-US war? And see what they tell you. And if it says yes, then your system is flawed because it's not true. We went through three different systems. We talked to a bunch of different people, and no. Okay. So what we're going to have here is a situation is what this does not do, and what it would not do was make Iran abandon its broader strategic ambitions. You know, the shooting has stopped, the competition continues. The historical lesson may be relevant today if one were to look at, let's say, let's draw a comparison to the end of the Iran-Iraq war. Should look at that as well. Not because the situations are identical, because the United Nations came in and stopped that, but because they demonstrate an important principle. A ceasefire does not necessarily mean a change in strategic objectives. And as I said, Iran accepted The end of the war, when continued fighting became too costly. I'm going to repeat myself because it's the same story again. It did not abandon its broader strategic ambitions. The shooting stopped. The competition continued. Two cases, same government, same outcome. As of now, same outcome. And a ceasefire should not automatically be interpreted as reconciliation. One final issue deserves attention at this point: the media narrative surrounding the reopening of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And a lot of people have this in a much different way. And I stopped looking at a couple of the guys' things because it was just clearly they had TDS. And you have to step back yourself so you don't get tunnel vision. But if you look at the shipping news and things like that and see what's going on, some commentators have portrayed recent tanker movements. Uh, Oil tankers belonging to Iran have gone through the blockade unmolested in the last couple of days. And they are saying that that evidence is that Iran has broken the blockade, that the Americans have surrendered. That's probably not what it is. There is probably another interpretation. A blockade can fail. I can run the blockade if it's not being enforced on the days leading up to a peace process. That's what really probably occurred. All right. And remember, even though people say, oh, you get in trouble for saying it, these are empty oil tankers. The full oil tankers, the minute this thing was signed, I bet if we go on Ship Tracker and whatever day this occurs, if it happens Friday and goes into effect, there is a foot race by the Iranians to get those full oil tankers out of the country, get these new ones in, and everybody has to be loading and loading and loading. But I'll tell you, it's funny. Carg Island's going to have to get busy, right? And who's really, even though we don't have troops there, who's really running Carg Island? Who can shut that place down in an afternoon if they want to? It's us, right? So like I said, those are very different situations there. The media perception that you're going to continue to see is continually anti-United States, even though they'll say it's anti-Trump, it's anti-United States, it's pro-status quo, pro-Europe. So if certain vessels are moving while enforcement continues against suspicious or deceptive shipping practices like the shadow fleet, then what we may be witnessing is not the collapse of the pressure, but selective relaxation of pressure as part of the negotiation process. The loss of the majority of this shadow fleet, I'd say majority, I have to go look at the numbers again, but since nobody really knows how many, you have to figure how many that there are that have been caught and say how many more of these things could there be out there, right? They're going to feel that at the end of 60 days when they want to play games. So again, the question comes back to leverage. Has leverage been lost or has it been temporarily suspended? The Iranians are showboating because they need to keep their goons back in country, positive that they're going to win so they can continue to whatever murder school children and shit that they're up to on a daily basis, knowing that there will never be any repercussions in their life because the Ayatollah is going to stay in charge, right? So that brings us to the conclusion that the most important thing to understand about this memorandum is that it is not the answer. It is not a finite object. It is not doing very much of anything except kicking the can down the road for 60 days. It is a test. The agreement does not resolve the nuclear issue. It postpones it. It does not prove that Iran wants peace at all because of the unrealistic level of the things that they want. Once again, just because the president has it in his hands doesn't mean he wrote it. Go back to what we said a memorandum of understanding is. It is a talking points list. We will negotiate based on these things. So the first thing they do is they go to the 100% extreme to try to get back to 50. They are being carpet salesmen, for lack of a better term. This is haggling. This is how it opens. So that's where we stand as of now. We will see more after the ceasefire goes into effect. We have to realize the importance of a couple of other things in there that was put in and is always put into Middle East peace agreements so that they are not taken over correctly, is they managed to lump the Israeli battle with the Lebanon with Hezbollah into the ceasefire agreement. Their problem being that this document was out before President Trump decided to say, let the Syrians go deal with Hezbollah because they're two militant factions that don't like each other. And the president of Syria, who himself is an old head chopper, you know, he'd be more than happy to get rid of the competition. Unfortunately, because Syria has a history of bullying Lebanon. So even though it's a new president in Syria, same old game will probably occur 5, 10 years down the road when he decides to grow his hair back in and stop wearing suits. So that's where we are for now. www.southfloridaconservative.com for the paperwork and some of the numbers. Hope you have a good day. Do not believe the hype on this one, people. You will feel so much better if you don't. See you later on.